How are you guys doing? Welcome to the thing. We're hanging out. Those games get mistreated. That's an understatement. Thank you. It's it's been growing for a very long time. How's everybody doing this evening? No, this is not a face reveal. If you go back in time a little bit, you'll see many a video where I've had my face out before. Old Let's Play videos, old stuff from just like talking and stuff. I think that feels fine enough. Do an actual like career because I don't have a save file on this memory card. It's weird that it's impactful like that, you know, and then it's usually like totally forgotten in among the swell of other Tony Hawk games. It just is lost in there. You know what? You know what? We'll be Chad Muska because 7 screens for his DVD players. If you're getting here and you are interested in anything, I answer most questions to the best of my ability. Uh, when did you first play extreme sports games? I think I was way young. My sister had a PS1. Cool Borders 4 probably would have been like the first extreme sports game I played. Skateland really was a great, great game. The DS was way overpowered for what it was. This is facts. Chad Muska is way underappreciated. Like Mike B or Jeff Rowley. They're, a lot of just really interesting names in skateboarding that don't quite get the same recognition that a lot of other names do. And it's not because the other names are bad or any, it's just like the exposure is not nearly so easy for some as it is for others, I think. Rooftops and alleys. Parkour game. That's the only other parkour game I can think of is Free Running for the PS2 or PSP. So yeah, I think I'll have to give that a look. Or Mark Echo's Getting Up. That's another one. Alright, I do some goals. I've just been fucking around for boring everyone to death. I thought, oh damn. You ever played Tekken 4? I have. I did play Tekken 4. I have a whole video where I did the first 4 Tekken games and tag tournament. Most favorite Tony Hawk game is Underground by a long shot, with Proving Ground as a close second. I used to love these goals when I was younger. These ones were so simple, and now I'm kind of like, oh, this is the busy work. I missed one. Shit. Thrasher Skate and Destroy was fun. That one was surprisingly fun because people kept telling me it was really janky, and I found out that like it wasn't nearly so bad as it looked. Yeah, I feel like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is probably the one in the modern age that like either was your first one and you love it more than the others, or you are only interested in it at the prospect of a 3+4, which is like in that instance, so many players I've seen have been interested in more of the 4 stuff than 3. I keep hitting shift. I accidentally fucking I don't think PCSX2 understands the difference between right shift and left shift. So both shifts are doing the same thing, but my left shift is supposed to be my 180 on that side. Alright, goals. I I'm getting kind of lost over here. I just finished the day and made dinner and such. Oh no. Favorite Tekken character is probably Bruce or Raven. Raven's got an awesome fighting style. The Dreamcast could have handled the regular port of 3 and 4. I feel like it was a way overpowered like that thing was amazingly powerful. I found Thrasher less janky than the PS1 Tony Hawk 1 and 2. I haven't played 4, but I own 3. That is sad and unfortunate. Disc scratching sucks, and you can only resurface them so much. It's I make backups of my games because like discs wear out just naturally. I wish Sega would do anything that's not just bad Sonic games. That's me. I'm being facetious, of course, because there's Lost Judgment and there's Jet Set Radio on the horizon, and they did that big announcement. Not that I think it was the end of last year, beginning of this year. Yeah, I've heard of it too. Was that's a game I'm kind of leery of. The old California games, um, Skate and Destroy, Skate and Die on NES, the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Original Tony Hawk games. Those are all gonna kind of be hard. Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, 100%. Because like, if you take the mechanics of Tony Hawk as it was when it was at its peak, and you give the player this enormous sandbox to run around in with all of these things they can find and all of these things they can do, you're guaranteed to end up with this infinitely replayable game that people are going back to forever. That one of the things that made a game like Oblivion so impactful was that you could return to it over and over and over again and always find something new when you came back. So like, for it to work, it would absolutely need to be as full as it possibly could be, and there would need to be skatable stuff everywhere. And the problem then becomes, how do you make it less repetitive? And that's like the big puzzle behind making a GTA sized Tony Hawk game is, how do we make it less repetitive and more interesting to keep players in for a longer period in time? No, I haven't. Disney Speedstorm. What is that? That's rather new. I haven't played a kart racer in a really long time. Project 8 did a lot of things right for me. Yeah, I just genuinely feel like Proving Ground did all of those things so much better. That's just me though. It hits certain personal spots for me that uh, Project 8 and American Wasteland and Thug 2 didn't. Yeah, I think that's kind of what the vibe was supposed to be. If they could figure out how to skate through paintings, it's pretty much the same thing. It makes me think of how influential Nintendo is like as much as I rag on them publicly, Nintendo has done a lot of things that influence everybody. I hate Nintendo. I hate giving them credit for things that they've done right, mostly because I know that they've done so many shitty things also. Yeah, Disney Speedstorm, that's something I'll have to look into. I have to do a racing games on the mind. I've been meaning to look at a bunch of different racing games from my childhood, like Beetle Adventure Racing, Cruising. Those are always the ones I go back to. It's You're absolutely right. Skateboarding games are kind of in a stagnant spot right now, and there's a void that can be filled with Riders Republic to some degree, but we haven't had something quite like this in a long time. Oh, Nintendo. If video games would be so much farther along if Nintendo didn't hold everybody back. I got way lost right there. That's interesting. Um, the idea of getting remakes is good and bad in that remakes often are better technologically than their originals, and most of the time the ones that have their original production members and original directors usually turn out excellent. uh, you get some that are not nearly as excellent and they get treated poorly because somebody takes somebody else's idea and remakes it. But I don't know. The remakes are like often usually, at least to me, better for what they do. And that's You need to remake a good game. You can't remake garbage and expect that garbage to suddenly be better. It's not like as if it wasn't working at first, it's not going to work later on, you know. Or maybe it will with some changes, but generally speaking, it probably won't. AW Fight Forever is another one that I've heard interesting things about. I mean, can that same thing not be said about uh nobody told me the camera was frozen or it's not frozen. I just looked at it wrong. That same thing can be said about a lot of Activision games lately though, is that like they at the end of Bobby Kotick's time in office and at the beginning of the Microsoft Activision life cycle were like just trying to grab as much cash as they could. But also businesses exist to grab cash. It's just what the developers then do to earn that cash that should make the difference. Like I like OnePlus 2 because I think Vicarious Visions earned it. I have Pro Skater HD installed and can confirm it is not good. But 2X is pretty good. Even still, like as visually outdated as it is, 2X is pretty good. That same, this is Activision. I I'm not justifying their actions because I don't care for Activision games either, right? At least not pre-Microsoft. Activision was pretty bad, so I'm hoping there's better for the future. Yeah, Activision generally, they don't have ideas. They they buy other people's ideas and they push those ideas out in the hopes that maybe the profit is great enough for them to do it 100 more times. Uh, Call of Duty is a great example. It suffers exceptionally from the fact that it is re-released every single year with minimal changes. I mean, they're still using the id Tech engine from 20 years ago. At least I think. I haven't checked. THPS is back. But that isn't that true of like every time it comes back because it does have a tendency to disappear for a long time. I don't even think. I think like I don't know. In the context of remakes, some games definitely have not been ideally remade, but other games have. Thug 2 has such good gameplay. I that that was the peak gameplay for the series. If Thug 1 had Thug 2's gameplay refinements, it would have been better than perfect. I'm getting kind of lost away from the game, reading the chat because I'm genuinely interested. It's an interesting conversation. It is a bad thing that Activision has that. I mean, it's not just Activision; just all companies have that way about them re-releasing the same things over and over again. And that's not. I mean, that's not even necessarily new because if we look back at, say, we look back at a game like Need for Speed from Hot Pursuit 1 forward, they added things, they changed things in minimal amount, but by the time we got to Need for Speed Undercover, they were effectively all the same thing. Like from Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 up to Undercover, they're all pretty identical. And then you get games like I was just playing Fight Night Round 2 at the beginning of the Tony Hawk Ride and Shred video, and Fight Night, every Fight Night game up to Champion is pretty identical, with some graphic improvements here and there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just blind. Cartoons about skateboarding. That's is it that is it the anime about the downhill racing? Yeah, NHL games, football games, wrestling games. Historically, like because they cannot change the sport itself, they're gonna follow within the paradigm of the sport, and that leads to the gameplay being pretty similar most of the time. Oh, so then I don't know what you're talking about, and that sounds terrible. Rockstar's take on THPS was Thrasher, Skate, and Destroy. No, I'm kidding. That was AKA Acclaim. Or at least it was Z Axis, who then later went on to get published by AKA Acclaim. Man, I've walked through so many games lately. The logic's mixed up all in there. It's like a bowl of salad. Jokes aside, say for example, we got a company that didn't wasn't Rockstar, right? Somebody more like reasonable to develop a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater title. Who among our modern studios would have the knowledge and experience to do this? Yeah, that's true. Rockstar has historically made pretty great games. I think. You think there's anything? Thank you for the compliment. I think as far as skateboarding games go, the most new we can do is add more flick controls to what we have. I think if I were to judge based on what we have right now, Skater XL is the right direction, but it doesn't have any game. There is no game there. There's no goal. There's no. It's just Skater XL is just skate around and welcome. What's up? I feel like Skater XL with goals, with an objective, maybe the Skater XL style in an open world would be the biggest next direction for skateboarding games. Yeah, Skatebird is hilariously bad good in that I can't believe it works and it works as well as it does, but also it's horrible to play. If you guys haven't checked it out on Steam already, there's an indie game called Street Uni X about street unicycling. It's a THPS clone. It's pretty good stuff. I've been waiting on that for a while. That looks exciting. Yeah, yeah, exactly that. Nickelodeon never really rang my bell. I remember having Rocket Power Beach Bandits when I was younger, um, and I don't remember much about it. Honestly, honestly, it's the the big hope is that the final game is definitely a little more polished. I love the idea that somebody took Tony Hawk and gave it a unicycling skin because it fits, it works. And it's such a new sport that didn't get to have that kind of opportunity in the 90s when these games were the most up and coming. You had Matt Hoffman and BMX games and Tony Hawk and the skateboarding games, Andy McDonald and TJ Levin and their games for MTV. And I on the topic of BMX games, did you guys see BMX Streets looks pretty good. It's a great looking game. If it's not as bad as BMX the game, it'll be good. Bloodstorm is such an interesting game. I don't know if anybody here has ever actually like watched snowcross. It's an insanely dangerous sport, but very exciting. The worst skating, the worst extreme sports game in general. I skateboard madness, but life is short and there's still plenty of games left to play. That could change very quick. There are still a ton of Phoenix games, action sports games that are probably pretty bad. BMX Triple X is banned from being streamed on Twitch. That's not surprising. Twitch bans everything. They don't like they don't like anything that might be even a little bit offensive. That's the thing, about games that you hear only bad things about. Is like there are times where I've heard only bad things about a game. Take BMX Triple X as a great example, and then I've come to enjoy it a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. Man, what up, man? You just get popping into the stream like that, man. Thank you. Have a great work. Yeah, BMX Triple X is a great example of a game that I heard terrible, terrible things about and wound up enjoying more than I thought I would. It's not a good game by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. It was just surprisingly a lot more functional than I thought it would be. And then you have a game like I just did Tony Hawk Ride and Shred. I had heard notoriously those games just did not work. Found out that that wasn't true. Pro Skater 5 in that same way. ESPN X Games skateboarding and Evolution skateboarding. I had heard horrible things about those games. Turned out those are pretty good. I never really know because I'm not quick to. There are only a few things that make me dislike a game. Like you have to be noticeably bad. There have to be noticeably bad, incorrect, wrong things for me to care. Most of the time, like if a game is just so bad that I don't like it, I'll just stop playing it. I try to skate in little bits and pieces, but I'm not good at it. I love skateboarding is the most fun thing in the world to watch, and I love standing on the board, but man, I am not a good skater. I would much rather be a boxer. Bubsy 3D is so interesting. I did a video a really long time ago called Why Bubsy 3D Failed. Um, and I speculated a little bit that maybe it had something to do with the Sega Saturn and the port that was being developed for the Saturn. And in that, I talk a little bit about this Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine article where it kind of it says it's coming out for the Saturn, and there's promo art for it, and that's really the only thing they have. I went a long time later and actually got a copy, that exact issue of the magazine, so I could look at the page that talked about the game specifically. And when that magazine was issued, the game was 60% complete. So I now know that it may have very well been the Sega Saturn's fault that Bubsy 3D wasn't that good. That's all speculation on my part. That isn't that just it, man? Like that, I hear about the time when the original Bubsy came out, and that was the mascot platformer era. There were so fucking many of them that you just couldn't avoid it. And that really is like the original Bubsy games aren't horrible. I wasn't even looking at the goal. The original Bubsy games weren't horrible. They were just like victim of the time is that everybody wanted to be a mascot platformer. Like you had between aside from Sonic and Mario, mascot platformers of the time, there were like Alex Kidd, uh, Rister. Was Dynamite Heady a mascot, or was that more like just Sega fucking around a little bit? I'm not as up on my '90s games as I was. I need to go back and do some looking at the time. I've been so focused on the PlayStation 2 era lately, and I'm forgetting some shit. And then at the dawn of 3D, you had even more mascots pop up. Like you had Gex and you had Bubsy 3D was another one. The Croc, Legend of the Gobus. Mario 64 also had the benefit of having an entire console and controller designed specifically for it. Like that's the most interesting thing about the N64 in general is that the original launch titles and anything that came from Nintendo was so purposefully designed for the Nintendo 64 and its quirks and eccentricities, like having a third handle. It just worked. Mario 64 today, like aside from its influence on video games, is probably like the biggest influence next to Quake in speedrunning. Uh, One of the biggest influences ever as far as platformers in general go, because now we have more collectathons and we know what to do with. Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider was very influential. That was Tomb Raider was sort of influential in that it was the evolved idea of the cinematic platformer of the past, like Prince of Persia, the original Prince of Persia or Oddworld or something like that. But given a 3D space with a little bit more interactivity and some action to go along with it, it was fluid. That did a lot of things that technologically were very complicated and other games weren't doing. Bubsy 3D needed a decade to be polished. I think Bubsy needed a better team. Like it probably would have done to have a couple extra QA testers, people come in like be like, hey, this needs cleaned up a little bit more, this needs cleaned up a little bit more. But then also deadline and that so there's only so much you can do. That is really the problem is like we as players like games to come out fast for some reason. There are I couldn't tell you why. There are over 200,000 commercial games available on Earth. I don't know why we need more, but gamers like games to come out fast. And at the same time we're always asking games to take extra time. And the hype kind of dies depending on how long it takes cuz you have to hit it in a sweet spot where you've taken just enough time but not so long that everybody's lost their interest. And publishers, being that their primary goal is money, probably are much more paranoid about things like that than indie studios or even larger studios that are headed by people who have video game development experience. Like you wouldn't get some corpo head knowing how the video game development process works, making a good judgment about the deadline and how long it should take because their whole goal is money. Honestly, I get it. If the publisher was funding the game and it had already taken too long, like, but they also probably could have saved themselves a lot of financial distress after the fact if they had just let them rebuild it. That is true mostly, with the exception that it wasn't really quicker. video game development has always taken a substantial amount of time. And back then, we didn't, the 90s was not the time of pre-built engines. They didn't have Unreal and Unity to get them ahead in life. They didn't have internet forums. They didn't have Stack Overflow telling them how to write programs. They had people doing the work and experimenting, and figuring out a lot of shit takes a lot of time. Like that equally comparable to building a giant game now. Like we build a giant game now and we have all of these programming problems that are already solved. And then we have all of these games from the past that were made at a time when they were solving these problems, and that took up all of the time. So like it's, and there's also the argument to be made that like that came with the advent of more bugs in a lot of cases. Like take a look at Ocarina of Time, for instance, which is notoriously broken, so much so that you can beat it in minutes. A giant 60-hour game you can beat in actual minutes. Hey man, what's up? Welcome to the stream. I thought about playing Thug Pro, and I thought about playing 1+2, but 1+2 is uninstalled, and Thug Pro would probably eat the network. I'm still thinking about that Bubsy 3D comment because if they were allowed to rebuild it from scratch, I can only imagine the amount of craziness that would have changed. Because so much of that game is wild and wacky and just strange as far as video games go. The pickups are weird, the levels are weird. If you let them go longer with even more freedom, I can't imagine what they would have produced. What game would you remake, if any, remaster, either or? Dual Hearts by Atlas deserves a remake more than any other game on the planet. Most underrated game ever made. And no, I have not played the Darkstalkers games, but I've heard great things, and I do like fighting games. That's a series that I need to get to. I remember also I was doing PlayStation 2 FPS games by the bundle, and I wanted to cover, I had a couple of things in mind and around that I wanted to talk about. It's gotten lost because I've done so many action sports. I just kind of went along with that. It got kind of lost that I was also covering other games at some point there. I forgot that I was covering other games. Yes, I am working on the Tony Hawk Game Boy games will all be grouped together into one. At least I'm going to try to group them together into one because there are a lot of Tony Hawk games on the Game Boy Advance. I don't have to lump in the DS games, and the PSP games will get their own dedicated video. Favorite TV programs? Lucifer was the best show I've seen in years. Was excellent. It's a cheesy ass buddy cop show with some of the worst jokes ever and a cringe-worthy premise, and I love every second of it. I'm not old enough to have watched Power Rangers. I don't think. I couldn't. I have no idea. If there were Power Rangers after 2000, that certainly wasn't what I was watching growing up. I think Pro Skater 4 is the best maps. Or at least this one is definitely one of the best maps. Go for it. I'm all ears. I'll still probably wind up doing my own research, but I'm definitely in to hear anything about them. Like, I always like to, even when I've already done research, before I read something, I'll go back and I'll check myself a couple of times again, just to make sure that, like, in the beginning, what I say about a game's backstory is actually, like, what I mean to say. I never know if I got a name wrong, or, like, if I got a date wrong or something like that, and I've made plenty of mistakes where like I said, Pro Skater 1 came out in 2009 in that video, and that was funny. Even when I do my own research, I still don't catch all of the mistakes. Thank you. I try. I mean, I don't try to get extremely in depth or anything like that. I feel like nobody does enough to highlight the people who actually make video games happen, or like the situations that video games are created under. And like I like to know some of that stuff before I start playing because it makes the experience a little more personal. Character models are colored instead of textured. Interesting. That could not have been easy for them to program. Uh, Writing color pixel by pixel like that is a tedious, long process. That is how Atari 2600 games, because of how extremely limited they were, mapped everything pixel by pixel. Textures didn't even exist back then. I have seen The Simpsons skateboarding, and I know who that team is. They did my least favorite game ever at the moment. Skateboard Madness was awful. If you haven't seen that video, or if you haven't taken a look at that game for yourself, it is just, it is real hot garbage. I suddenly felt a lot younger when I realized I had never seen Power Rangers. So AI works inside. I actually have a in a folder here somewhere. I have something called Old Game Dev Wisdom. Where is the extracted folder? I have a document that talks about AI with great length, and it describes how AI works. And this goes back. This is from the 90s. Uh, AI is not going to replace programmers. But what it will do is help programmers more quickly find the idea that they're looking for. So it won't really be helpful in writing a program for you, but it'll definitely point you in the right direction toward figuring out what the problem you're trying to solve actually is. AI, the way it works, what it does, what it is, machine learning is very rudimentary. It just has gotten to be larger and more intaking than it used to be. Oh, there's a skateboarding game for the Atari 2600. That sounds interesting. That's actually incredibly advanced technology for something as simple as the Game Boy Advance. Like, that is pretty amazing. think AI in general, as far as anything that involves creating goes, AI in general cannot exist without information to be fed. And human beings have to exist to feed that AI information. So no matter what it is you're doing, whether you're an artist, you're a musician, something like that, your work has to exist for any AI to do what it does. And if in the off chance that one day that stuff does not exist anymore, there is no sense of creation that the AI will ever have. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it. One of my few completed games on retro achievements is the Game Boy Advance prototype of Resident Evil 2. Probably the most impressive use of that little thing I've ever seen. I Resident Evil 2 was ported to the N64, and that was impressive because it's an enormous game for that. But to even think that it might have been possible to have that same thing on something as tiny as the Game Boy Advance, like that is such an incredible thought. It would have had to have been two cards. They would have had to split each character campaign onto separate cards probably to make that work. I've Yeah, you can get. I've played a little bit of Underground for the Game Boy Advance. You can get knocked out incredibly easy too. It's not even like a good health bar that lasts a long time. You fall a couple of times in small shit, and that is whole health bar gone. You start right back at the start of the level again, and that is super annoying. If that is the definitive worst version of Underground IMO. I'll talk way more in depth about that when I talk about those. Man, do I have some words. There's no reason to interrupt the flow like that. Like you've seen me fall here thousands of times, and there's nothing wrong with just letting the player pick up and keep going. That depends on the action sport. A game like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or anything that has you doing a lot of hopping is a platformer in the sense that there is platforming to be done. Absolutely. But then you get action sports games like boxing is an action sport, and that is standing very stationary. Or I suppose UFC games can be considered action sports also. A favorite pro wrestler, Mick Foley. I know, it's real. A health bar in a freaking tech fantasy game. How did we. Who thought that was a good idea? Like, it's skateboarding. You're guaranteed to fall. It's gotta be annoying. I still have not played through the entirety of New Jersey because it's got to be annoying later on doing more complicated things that the game is asking and having those moments where you fall and it's just health bar gone. It's frustrating in the beginning. I can't imagine what it's like after that. It's realistic. I know. I hate that. I hate that. Such a bad way to handle games. Opt for better gameplay. 100% of the time, even if your game is trying its damnedest to be a simulation, opt for better gameplay. Make the simulation feel better than the real thing. I suppose like it could be a way to encourage you not to bail, or it could just be punishment because they think you shouldn't bail that much. But you're right, it is either way, it's pretty stupid. I don't watch a lot of wrestling like I did when I was growing up, but I remember watching videotapes, VHS tapes, my mom's old shit, my dad's old shit, maybe. A bunch of Mick Foley and Undertaker stuff and Kane stuff, a lot of Attitude Era stuff that, like, and we had uh, WWF Warzone was a game that I played a lot when I was a kid. Spyro 3 at skateboarding? I don't remember. I haven't played through the Spyro games outside of Enter the Dragonfly. And if you know, you know. That's interesting. I kind of want to see that. Spyro has skateboarding. We're gonna have to look at that, gang. Yeah, that is 100%. Spyro 3 has skateboarding. That is incredible. I had no idea. That's such a neat, like, as mini games go, skateboarding is always a good decision. I think it was just as good a decision in Kingdom Hearts 2 as I think it is right here. It adds a lot to what is already a really full game. That is so cool. NHL hits. No, I haven't even touched hockey. I have I've smacked a hockey puck with a hockey stick, but I've never watched a game of hockey. I've never played a hockey game. And that's something that, like, I probably should get to. I'm gonna have to look at some glitches for Thug to push myself through it because I want to see more of it than just the first level, and I don't think I have the willpower to do it normally. Everyone's first console. My first console was the Sega Genesis. I almost positive Sonic the Hedgehog 1 was the first game I ever played. Jeff Hardy. Very flexible looking dude. Then again, like all pro wrestlers are flexible in that way. I love hearing people talk about wrestling and they go like, "Oh, it's so fake. I can't. Why would you watch this fake fight?" But I would love to see any person that thinks wrestling is fake backflip off a turnbuckle onto a dude. It doesn't matter how rehearsed it is. It doesn't matter how good the conditions are. You are going to get hurt doing that. Ah, NFL Blitz, that's something I'm familiar with. I'm definitely gonna have to give that a look then, because those are great arcade. NBA Street, another good, great arcadey ball sport game. Not huge into ball sports, but there are some really good ball sport video games. It does. That's I don't abide by the rules of why would you, being a fan of something is just like being a fan of a thing. There's getting involved in a community is usually a surefire way to let other people tell you how to think. Oh yeah, or yeah, however you pronounce the Japanese pro wrestling, that their league is something else entirely. Those guys are really heavy-handed. Nah, man, Thug 2 got bad treatment all the way around. That was on that it has so many ideas. It could be one of the best games. Like even the game knowing even the Game Boy Advance version got a little shafted. It's kind of sad. Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming by. I imagine that is excruciating. That is a lot of wrestlers put up with a shit ton of abuse. Yeah, fandoms. It's man, that's preaching to the choir. I won't even, on the fandom issue, I won't even talk about it. I've talked about it a lot. I'll go ahead and just like, there are things I have said between my website and my YouTube channel that are very stark in regard to letting a fandom control you. Yeah, exactly. Like the predetermined has nothing to do with it. The acrobatics in pro wrestling is just amazing. Sting, a little while back, I'm not sure how much pro wrestling everybody watches, but a little while back, Sting in the AEW took a dive off of the ring, right lip first into a table. Real nasty that. Skateland DS was a nice classic experience. I don't know why they would want to do that differently for the Game Boy Advance. Because, like, it worked. The DS port works so well. That should have been, once they knew that was the direction they were going, all of that other open world stuff that didn't need to be in, because these are handheld games, right? They're not whole comp. These were, and handheld games back then were not like handheld games now where we have switches and stuff. The Game Boy Advance could only do so much, and all of the open world stuff is stuff that could have gone without in favor of better gameplay. I don't even know how long we've been going. I've kind of lost track of time here. That's unfortunate. They should have focused entirely on the DS port. By the time Skateland came out, there was no reason to keep releasing those games on Game Boy Advance. But that's just an Activision all the time thing. Oh yeah, dude, you can't just like fall off the top of a cage like that and not get hurt. That was is still such an insane clip today. There aren't many that match that in like how powerful it looks, how dangerous it looks. Favorite Dreamcast game? Um, Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't get my subscriber count to hear you guys did that. You are the subscribers, so that's all on you guys. It's 100% your accomplishment. Yeah, favorite Dreamcast game. Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare is really good. Like that's probably next to the European PS2 port. That's the definitive version of that game. I can't imagine they treated any of the Game Boy Advance games after Pro Skater 2 good. We have this we have this very interesting problem in the world of action sports games altogether, where games get released for every single console every single time, and it doesn't need to be that way. And it's not just action sports games, other games do that too, but action sports games specifically try to target the previous generation for as long as they possibly can. Like look at the PlayStation 2, kept production of games up until 2013, and in the end it was all sports games. That was all that was left. Project Justice, that sounds familiar. For the fighting game, okay.
It's okay, right? I give that one a 6 out of 10. Kind of neat. And Kyosuke's would be.
It's a fighting game I haven't seen. It's supposed to read Awa. What the fuck is an Awa? I don't know if anybody's seen the Jeff Grosso's love letters to skateboarding. I love that joke. They make jokes about how the Alva logo looks like Awa. It's and you know it's I imagine that probably caused a shit ton of confusion back then. Yeah, yeah. I hear we go back to games that are licensed to like big action sports stars like Dave Mirra and Tony Hawk and Travis Pastrana, and then we don't go back and play Madden 1998 because why the hell would you go back and play Madden 1998? I'm not sure what uh, Street Fighter perception is, but I liked Street Fighter 6. I thought it was pretty good. You know, I feel like that probably would not be the worst thing in the world. I picked Donald Duck in Disney Sports Skateboarding for the GameCube for a reason. There's something about the large feet, and this is a thing that happens in Thug Pro too. There's something about the really large foot size that makes controlling the board in game a hell of a lot easier. I it I kind of am because like on the one hand, Proving Ground was not as bad as Skateboard Madness. As a game, it technically was definitely not as bad, and it had a lot more game. But it was also a downgraded version of a game that was so much better. And I feel like the only that's what separates the studio that did Project 8 on PS2 and Proving Ground on PS2 from Robomoto later after the series is there was a clear difference in who was and was not passionate about what they were doing. I you don't feel like Page 44's passion for these games did not exist. At least not noticeably or visibly. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have figured that out, honestly. That's just such a strange goal. I would have been lost thinking the game ended sooner, probably. Man, what up? Welcome to the stream. We're hanging out. I meant to be playing a game, but I've been talking so much that I kind of have zoned out on that a little bit. It's EA. EA paywalls whatever the hell they can. They historically are my least favorite video game publisher. The removal of features year over year is just as bad as the aggressive monetization of trading cards. And I think Skate 4 is just going to be that exact same thing, where they find every way in the world after the fact to paywall things that already existed. They're going to, like, I almost feel like they're going to try to sell you tricks. And that sucks. But it is EA. Reginald. If I had a pet duck, I would name it Reginald. I think it just auto removes. I think it just auto removed the link. I'm not sure. I see the comment, but I don't see the link. That might be a my end issue. Man, microtransactions are bad, and we all think that this is some. Plenty of us think that this is some new problem that we've only seen over this last couple console generations. But if we really want to get technical, Nintendo back in the 1990s was selling Satellaview for the Super Nintendo, and that was subscription based, and that was, I mean, that's a pretty hefty amount of money to. We go a little bit further in time. World of Warcraft selling gold, 2004 and 2005. Buying tricks doesn't sound realistic, but remember, Konami once upon a time sold saved game files for Metal Gear Survive. As something as simple as your save file cost extra in a game like Metal Gear Zombies. How that happened, I couldn't tell you, but companies that are bad tend to do bad things. Konami's not nearly as bad as they used to be. That was more or less like insulting back and forth with Kojima than Konami being a shit company. Whereas EA is historically a pretty shit company. What do they fucking digitally disable your seat if you don't pay a fine or something? What the hell kind of, why would you even buy a car that does that? That's that's super low, but the rich will buy whatever is buyable, I suppose. Yeah, that's really what it comes down to for me. Like they are a business, and at some point down the line, we accept them as a business and be like, well, I just don't have to buy. I just don't buy your product then, and that pretty much is how that has worked out for me. I quit playing Call of Duty at Black Ops 4, stopped for a long time, came back at Modern Warfare 2 for that little bit of time that was running, and it was just as bad as I remember it. So like, probably won't buy another Call of Duty. Not a big fan of Activision in general. I can just hope Microsoft does something better. They did. EA made Road Rash on Sega Genesis. They did a number of games on Sega Genesis, and their story with that console is so weird. EA could not secure the licensing rights to produce Sega Genesis cartridges. It just wasn't happening. So they decided, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves. And they started building their own cartridges with this little yellow distinct tab, and they look different. You can tell EA cartridges apart from Sega cartridges for that reason. They got sued for that. There was some back and forth that went along there. In the end, EA was allowed to keep selling their games. But, like, it was a super sketchy way for EA to break into the scene. They made great games, they did a good job. It was just a really weird way for them to force their way onto that console. They're a very heavy-handed company. A lot of games on DS get passed over because they look strange. But I imagine like pocket sports games are probably better than console sports games for a lot of reasons because you can take them with you. They're fast. You can jump in and just go and like they don't have to focus on the online or stuff like that. The most ethical publishing company we have right now is probably Devolver Digital. And that's as far as company ethics goes. Like they're the one that stands out as the one that isn't always doing something malicious or in the news for some sketchy shit. The Harry Potter games. That's those games are interesting because some of them are really good and then others are really bad. Like Chamber of Secrets, mid. Prisoner of Azkaban, it's pretty good. Then you get Goblet of Fire, and that is just a bad game. They did. No Man's Sky did right by their fan base, and that makes me think of. I'm not sure what everybody's stance on Starfield is, but if you know anything about big procedurally generated space games, or even like in the case of Starfield, it's not quite procedurally generated. It just is a bunch of planets that are laid out in a pattern. Uh, it has time. It has time to evolve. No Man's Sky, it took 10 years for No Man's Sky to get from the empty wasteland it was at launch to where it is, where it got to eventually. And I feel like Starfield has that same opportunity. Microsoft and Bethesda under Microsoft cares more about the games now than they did when Fallout 76 was coming out, but they have yet to prove that they care as much as when Skyrim or Oblivion came out. So, like, it's a toss up from here whether Starfield will succeed or not. Hello Games really did do a great job with No Man's Sky, though. That was one of the biggest comebacks. Yeah, but I think we've come too far into the future of expecting patches to come out after a release. It's convenient that we have that luxury and that time and that capability, but that same luxury is kind of why video games fail in the beginning. There was a time when games released and they were just done. And if they weren't done, then everybody knew your game was bad. And once it was on the shelf on disc, you couldn't do much about it. It's it's not even it's not even an invincibility feeling. Bethesda doesn't feel like they're invincible. In Fallout 76, we forgot that controversy so fast just before Microsoft acquired Bethesda. Fallout 76 was the worst video game launch in modern history. And it came with a bunch of bait and switch and a bunch of like really bad shit on launch about the game, the bugs, the server problems, every number of things. And I think that was the breaking point for Bethesda. Starfield wasn't too overloaded and it wasn't too crazy because they're afraid more than they feel invincible. And that's rightfully so. They're now a subsidiary under a bigger company, which is bigger than ZeniMax ever could have been. And that adds a lot more pressure than they had before. That failure that they were recovering from in the development of Starfield, that lingers. You can feel that Bethesda is paranoid and afraid more than conquering and cocky. My favorite genre to play in my personal time is probably rhythm games. I've played more Guitar Hero in my life than I can even remember. Exactly. Like you wouldn't walk into Burger King and be like, "I want a Whopper," and then have them only give you the lettuce or the tomato and be like, well, "Yeah, that's good. I'll wait for the rest of it." You'd get pissed off and be like, "Where the fuck is my burger?" And that's a much faster, much smaller example of that thing happening, but you do pay for a service that you then don't get later, and that makes a difference. That's I have a deep rooted hatred for Cyberpunk 2077. I love Cyberpunk, the theme, the tabletop game, the source books. Cyberpunk Edge Runners was excellent. Cyberpunk 2077 was a disaster. Fucking tell me about it. I only have a couple of Guitar Hero guitars now. They're off in the other room. I used to have when I was younger a bunch of them. I, Guitars just sitting around everywhere. I had one of those weird V-shaped ones with the tap frets at the front, and the big weird like it was like mouse shaped, and it had a bunch of lights on the front of it. Was the dongle was just like way bulkier than it should have been. I can't even remember who the hell the manufacturer was. It was a weird off-brand guitar, but it was like $90. Yeah, honestly. And there was hype for the Riffmaster guitars, but after my excursion into Gitadora and Guitar Freaks from Japan, I feel like the Western guitar creation market has absolutely fallen apart. We're so far behind that we don't even understand how far behind we are. The money that Riffmaster guitars put into the front frets could have been better spent buying mechanical frets for the regular set, and that would put us on par with Gitadora guitars as far as playability goes. And I know that like the idea of mechanical frets just built into guitars sounds silly to us as Americans, but that is how Guitar Freaks has done it forever. It just should be that way. We should be making guitars with mechanical frets, and Riffmaster sort of missed that opportunity a little bit, looks like. Other than that, it's just another off-brand guitar, which is unfortunate. It looked so promising at first. There's an excellent that this is totally off topic. The Guitar from DJ Dow. This is an off-brand Gitadora guitar, and it is also mechanical frets. I did get into playing instruments. I played the clarinet when I was much younger. And now I play guitars. I have a bunch of guitars. This is my current guitar. She's a little bit dirty because I just play a lot and I haven't really done much maintenance or anything like that. But yeah, I spend my time kind of learning to, and it's mostly just for the sake of remembering all of that time I spent in grade school learning music. I have no idea what the stream delay is like, so yeah, that's unfortunate. There was potential there for something amazing, like they could have been so good. I was every time I look at this, right, I think this is how far behind we are in terms of rhythm games. My favorite Mortal Kombat was Armageddon, and then 9 was a close second. Playing the clarinet was I played I played my brother's secondhand clarinet um through like the early part of grade school, and that is one of the strangest. I like string instruments and I like playing an instrument with my hands because blowing into a thing is something that like I don't know. I couldn't buzz to play anything brass, and I could never really. I was a really fat kid, so back then I couldn't pull myself together to get the lung strength to play through a whole clarinet set as well as I would have liked to. But I did learn a lot. Yeah, this is how far behind we are, and it's not just the mechanical frets, it's also the gyroscope. If anybody doesn't know, the Gitadora uses tilting in both directions, up and down. And it sounds silly, but it is definitely more advanced than what we have. Yeah, I see what you making them ice jokes, huh? Yeah, yeah, you learn music in general. You learn to read music, you learn what music is supposed to sound like, you get a little bit of music theory in there and the structure of. I don't talk about it very much. I've used my tracks a couple of times. I I play around with electronic music every once in a while. In Gitadora, wailing and star power are different things. Star power in Guitar Hero is something that you activate and it goes on for a long time and you get more points while star power is activated. In Gitadora, when you wail in the right direction and that gives you a very, very quick, very temporary boost in points. So the actual system of tilting, what the games have you do, is way different. And Gitadora is a lot more punishing in that way. It's not like star power can very easily save you from completely failing a song. Gitadora doesn't give you that. They don't give you the saving grace of getting more to your life meter or more points at an 8x count. They give you you get this tiny speed boost with a perfect plus for like 5 notes, and that's all wailing does. And it happens constantly. Like wailing isn't something you do you build up a bar for and you build up a it's something that you do constantly throughout the song at particular intervals, and it adds to like it's a whole other note that you have to play using the tilt altogether almost. Yeah, another interesting thing about Gitadora is that there are no hammer-ons and pull-offs. It is an entirely strumming game. Matter of fact, if you I'm not good at it. My video is not the place to go to look at good Gitadora footage. But there are professional Gitadora players for the Konami Arcade Championship, and they make it look great. Like it's such an insane looking game. This is the Drum Mania portion. I'll see if I can skip ahead here. Guitar Freaks in the way that it works is such an intensive game comparatively. It's a whole different beast, and that's what kept me so interested in it when I started playing Gitadora. I was interested in the difficulty above everything else. For those of you who don't know, Guitar Freaks, Konami's original guitar arcade game, is the guitar game pioneer. It is the game that inspired Guitar Hero after the fact. The original you only played with 3 fret buttons, and it looked a little bit strange. But it is the guitar game. It's where the entire idea comes from. see if I can find some footage of one of the older arcade cabinets, because the old guitars are interesting. Uh, Maybe one of the Bs. Maybe. Oh, hold on. The bulkiness of this thing is incredible. Oh man, what a fucking. That brings a tear to my eye a little bit. Those are newer. That brings a tear to my eye a little bit, the completionist situation, because if. Yeah, Gitadora, Guitar Freaks. It now is called Gitadora. Uh, I don't know if anybody could tell watching my videos. It's pretty obvious I grew up heavily influenced by the likes of creators from Normal Boots, Hidden Block, and the like that. And I don't want to say anything about it, but the idea of the completionist doing something so against people after having been like this pinnacle face of positivity after such a long time is greatly disappointing. One of the most disappointing things that and that's it makes me think about like who else is and is not potentially doing something that could be harmful to their audience. That's the only thing I can think about. The people who are impacted and how this affects the audiences that genuinely look up to these people. I'm trying to be cautious because I'm a small channel and I don't want to say anything because I don't know as much about that as I would like to. But I know that from what I've heard, it is incredibly disappointing. It is very sad. I know what I'm doing wrong. I know why I can't find what I'm looking for. I was looking for the wrong game. It wasn't even called Gitadora until Guitar Freak's fourth mix, I think. But yeah, Guitar Freaks was originally a three-button guitar game that Konami pioneered in Japan, and the guys who created Guitar Hero went to Japan, saw Guitar Freaks, and thought, we really want to bring that into the homes of people. Uh, it's a hell of a lot funnier landing on your nuts than on your face. When somebody gets credit carded or clocked in the nuts by a handrail or something, that's pretty funny to watch. I've had it happen to me a number of times, not even skateboarding, just doing dumb shit. I've credit carded myself on every number of things, and it's funny to me after the fact. Landing on your face, that's dangerous. That is a lot less funny to see because like as the viewer, you look at it like, oh man, what a wipeout. That's so gnarly. And look at him stand back up. And to the guy riding, he's probably like, damn, I shattered my cheekbone right there. And my face hurts like hell. And I lost a tooth and my jaw is broken. And like, and there's also the risk of like your head is where your brain is. Your head is what does all of your cognitive functioning. It is the thing that like makes you work. It's your CPU as a person. So the less damage you do to that, the better. The funny thing, I say that, and like I know full well that getting yourself into a sport where you're doing something, any stunts or anything of that nature, you're gonna get hit in the head. Like I think about boxing, I really want to be a boxer, and I know that that entails getting hit in the head. And I really think it just is a matter of like accepting the danger without glorifying it because the thing that you don't want to do is get hit in the head. You want to try to avoid that. Credit carded just means so like if you land on your board and it tips up sideways and hits you in between the crotch, that's getting credit carded. Yeah, that's the sound of my doggo. She is off doing doggo things. I I can stand on a board, I can ride a board, I can do small shit, like I can ollie a board and I can do a regular shove it. I tried to do a 360 shove it for the ride video, but that ended pretty badly. I am not a good skater. I just like being on the board. It is a dream to go down a mega ramp at least once. Like, even if I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, even if I hadn't been training in a long time, I would still want to go down a mega ramp. She's like 6 now, I'm pretty sure. She, I got her in, I got her as a puppy in 2019. She was still brand new back then. 2019 was, no, she's 5 then. I have a hard time kind of keeping track of the days. I don't even remember my own birthday most years. Yeah. Yeah, skateboard goes vertical and it just like that's a shitty way to land. 3K sub doggo reveal. I If I can get her on camera long enough to do a dog reveal. Dang. That's interesting. Finding leverage to grab onto. I hadn't considered that. I go out and I practice tricks a little bit, and every single time I do that, I'm just kind of working on the ground. So like that's a great idea. In high school, we had a set of stairs just outside of the side door of the building that had this glorious handrail, but the stairs themselves were like 4 feet up off of the ground. And it was fun to try to do hurdles over it because it was a thin staircase. Like, you had a long running start before the stairs dropped down, and you could get really good vaults over this handrail. And man, did I went over the handrail going for a vault, kind of twisted a little bit, and I felt my hip crack under me, and that hurt enough as it was. And I came down chest first, landed straight up my crotch. The stopping force on my chest slammed my crotch down on the handrail, and that was the worst. It is just awful. I'm I used to be a Raiders fan. I haven't watched football in a long, long ass time, but I used to be a Raiders fan. Um, I haven't watched many team-based sports in a while. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hill bombing is terrifying. I I don't mind hills in little bits. I like a good short hill where you're like, yeah, that's cool. I could have fell down there and that's not so dangerous. But then like the San Francisco hills or the guys that go longboarding down mountains and things like that is terrifying. The San Francisco hills just are so nasty looking. I wouldn't even try. Hello, welcome to the stream. Seahawks. That's a football team? Football team. Ouch. Yeah, ouch. That I imagine that doesn't feel very good. Since 2008. Uh long, long, long time. I recognize the names. I recognize your name. You should comment on almost all of the videos. Um, Generally speaking, I tried my hardest to interact with everybody and remember the names and not just be like a, hey, thanks for watching, nameless, faceless. Like, I really am trying my damnedest to care about everybody who watches because, like, you guys are people that are worth caring about. I had, yeah. So between 2008 and now, if you're wondering about like my origin on YouTube, between 2008 and now, I've had every number of different YouTube channels. And I've had this one in particular since 2015. When I turned 15, I kind of settled on what pseudonym I liked, what image I was going for, and many other different things. And like there were just a lot of things that came together all at once. And then before that, I had a bunch of different channels with a bunch of different shit that all were many like I went from it started with Microsoft Paint cartoons and moved on to Let's Play videos at the height of 2011 when Let's Plays were popping off. And then I did my first reviews in 2012 from like 12 to 14. And like growing up on YouTube, I learned to do a lot and learned just how stupid I was for doing a lot of those things, but I don't regret any of it because it was still like a lot of it is why I am how I am now. I appreciate that. It's always fun to have the comments and the engagement and stuff. I meant to play video games here, got kind of lost on the Guitar Freaks tangent. We've been staring at that cabinet for a while. They have a bunch of very interesting cabinets. That makes me feel good. That because I try not to. I get lost pretty easily, and I stutter sometimes, and I breathe pretty heavy. There are a lot of things that like I try to do to make sure that my commentary doesn't end up bad because I don't want to be annoying over it. That's fine. The tangents are cool. That's what this whole thing was about. Uh, I didn't like I know I don't know what to expect from anybody asking anything or like what anyone would have wanted to talk about or anything. So like the conversation's good no matter which way it goes. Yes. Did you know that there is an irrational fear that a duck somewhere is watching you? So that means a lot. Um, Ideally, I want to keep track of video game history. I want to be a place where you can come to like look at a game that you may have played when you were young or that you may have never seen before and you missed out on or something like that, and you can be like make the determination for yourself based on what you see, what you hear me say, what you hear every other critic about it say, kind of provide the opinion so that like you know whether or not you want to go back to it. We have a significant downturn in real critical reviews, and that's been true since 2016. Like most of what you see now is retrospective pieces that reiterate and regurgitate, and it's not quite as personal as it used to be. And my end goal is never to tell you what games are or are not good. It's just to look back on and remember those games. Yeah, appreciate that. We made it to 2K. Does it really look that bad? I think it might just be because like my mustache comes out to about here. It might just be because of the lighting. Um, I also just haven't. I don't take the best care of my hair or my facial hair. I did my last kickflip when I was 18. Like, I learned how to kickflip when I was 18, and I was still well enough in shape to get it done back then. But that was a few years ago now. That was 2018. I actually am so focused on I've been so focused on my abdomen and my arms that I totally fucking shit out on my legs. Yeah, the games games get treated badly. Even bad games get treated badly. I didn't. I didn't graduate. I went to high school for 2 years after a long stagnation away from school. Um, And it's just always been that it wasn't the environment where I thrived or where things were happening for me. You'll always hear me say the same things about the education system. Not good. I've probably I've probably learned more in the last 5 years post being an adult. Like things that I actually probably would have learned in high school than I ever actually learned in high school. DMC is a very underrated game. Uh, People make the hair jokes. I think it's fine. DMC as a game with gameplay is so fluid and really is so good. The whole Devil May Cry series is pretty good. There is a Steep video in the works. Steep is a big game. Steep is a big game like Skate. That's one that's going to take a while like Skate. So I have to kind of... Those are a divide and conquer kind of game. Martial law? Law's got a lot of agility. Yeah, so on the old games, games are never too old. Um, if a game was good when it came out, then it's probably still good today as a game. It's just that games get better. Something does not get worse because other things get better. Right? Like Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, they never got worse just because the other one was training harder than the other one. They both got better in the way that like good stays when you have it. They didn't revert to bad over a loss. They were still good and just gradually built up more than that. So like games that are old, they're not bad if they were good back then. I don't know. I don't mind GTA 3 so much. I think it depends on how well adapted you are to the game that you're playing. It's like GTA 3. When I play GTA 3 or any of the classic trilogy for that matter, I always just tell myself it's the same game. And I know it's not. I know GTA 3 has a lot of limitations in comparison with Vice City, has limitations in comparison with San Andreas, right? Nico couldn't swim. But also, at their core, run, do mission, shoot. Grand Theft Auto. Not necessarily so bad it's good. So long since the controversy that it's forgivable. Like the Pro Skater 5 isn't even necessarily a bad game. It just isn't a great game either. It's something that got shafted for being way less than it could have been. Mm, if GTA 3 was released exactly the same way that it was made back then, today, and Rockstar was still the sizable company they are today, absolutely not. It probably wouldn't have been nearly as good. But you take 10,000 people out of Rockstar, And yeah, that would still be a pretty good game by today's standards because like look at it's 2024 and we are still actively playing 16-bit games and pixel art games vividly. They are everywhere. Some of the most popular games we have on Earth right now are based on games from 30 years ago. Celeste was one of the most influential games of the modern age, probably. And it's based on a game from 30 years ago. Games that were hated back in the day but loved now. Chrono Trigger is the earliest example of a game that everybody hated originally and then eventually grew fond of. Or you had game Earthbound in that same RPG realm. Earthbound was very underappreciated when it came out, and it was kind of looked at poorly. But I think now there's a good cult following for it. Cult followings develop over time. Movies are the same way. You know, movies are that exact same way. Like cult followings just develop over time as people find things that they like about things. They appreciate those things. And even bad things can be good to some people. Yeah, it shouldn't have been called Pro Skater 5. It should have been called literally anything else. That was the killer for it. Because everybody knew that Tony Hawk was beyond the AAA standing. It had become a budget game series if it was going to come back. And the fact that they labeled it Pro Skater 5 made it look like a main entry when that just wasn't really like from Robomoto's development side of things, that was never what it was going to be. I mean, Final Fantasy VII, if it were released today, probably would not have been the same cultural icon. But Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, if Intergrade released today and Final Fantasy VII the original had never released, then I think yes, it would probably be just as influential. Oh, absolutely. There's no there's no empty space greater than skateboarding, BMX, and snowboarding games. It's the one mostly untouched genre where the small selection we have is clearly not the definitive way to do it. And there's definitely somebody out there who will take skateboarding games and make them better. Damn, that's crazy. You know, makes me feel all right knowing that I could be helpful, something to listen to and keep your mind busy. I couldn't tell you why people like, I'm looking at that comment and I'm reading it, and I couldn't tell you why people like Tifa so much, and the adverse, I couldn't tell you why people like Final Fantasy so much. Hot take, I know. There are 96 Final Fantasy games. How could I possibly not like them? I mean, is it though? I don't even think it's outdated. From my perspective, Final Fantasy VII was just always bad. I've never been a fan of the Final Fantasy series to any major degree. And when I was younger, when I was 12 and I first played Final Fantasy VII, 2012, long after the years it had come out, it was still pretty technologically similar to some stuff that we had around that time. Like it wasn't anything too far old yet. It just wasn't good. That was really what killed it for me. The only Final Fantasy games that I've actually found myself enjoying are Final Fantasy 3 and then the spin-off games. So like Crisis Core is really good. And Dirge of Cerberus is really good in relation to Final Fantasy VII. Stranger of Paradise would be so much better if you didn't have to manage your inventory. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming by. Have a good night, man. That's all the way across the world. Wow. Germany, that's a way far away distance from here. Game with the worst graphics but best gameplay. That's a tough one. That's a real thinker. I'm going to think on that for a second and we'll come back to that. If some of your favorite movies, do you think you'd ever do film reviews? Maybe. I don't know. Uh, as far as favorite movies go, I've seen a lot of movies, and most of my favorites are deep cultural pieces. Like Synecdoche is probably my favorite movie, just in general. And then great old movies like Schindler's List is an excellent film. Uh, Saving Private Ryan is really good. The Godfather series, uh, Scarface, The Boondock Saints is a great movie. Games with the worst graphics but the best gameplay. That's an interesting question. I'm really trying to, because I can't think of many games where I don't like the visuals much. Uh, Probably Resistance Retribution for the PSP. I mean, it's an excellent third-person shooter. The gameplay is really top quality, but it's a PSP game, and they opted for realism, so it doesn't look good. It definitely is not a looker. The original Mad Max Fury Road is a good movie. I was a big fan of the original Mad Max films. Plenty of people have seen The Road Warrior and Thunderdome. I used to have a copy of the original Australian Mad Max on DVD, and that is just excellent. Excellent, excellent. Shrek versus martial law. Who wins? That is certainly the question. I couldn't tell you. Who knows? It might be martial law's swamp out here. How long have we been going, chat? I haven't been looking at the. We've been going for 2 hours. That's neat. I've been staring at the chat for so long that I kind of forgot we were doing stuff over here under the stream. That all totally got lost in there. I also, you know, Australia produces some of the best cartoons. They have some of our greatest animators come from Australia, and that is a testament to like just how creative they are. Son of a bitch, that's a brilliant point. That is, why would he bother acting like the toys if he didn't think he was a toy? That is such a man. Toy Story ruined. If I could make a skateboarding game, I would make Thug Pro, but with a career mode. Because Thug Pro has all of the great things I like about Underground 2 in gameplay, with a bunch of very weird and interesting tech things that add so much to it. And a lot of them are based on glitches and things, but imagine if they weren't bugs. Imagine if those things were features. Like, if you could boost plant and butt slap and neuro plant just regularly in game on command anywhere you wanted, that would make for a killer skateboarding game. But also, that's just tech fantasy skateboarding. If not that, I would probably do something similar to Skate 2. Skate 2 was really good. I mean, that's not wrong. Japan's got the biggest animation industry in the world. Australia and New Zealand both produce a ton of great animation. I know Italy has a lot of animated stuff. Um, I'm almost certain some of the earliest animators came from Italy. Exactly, it's not a bug, it's a feature. That the boost plant is such an interesting idea in Thug Pro. You do a wall ride, you spammed a couple of buttons simultaneously in this combination, and you end it with a boneless. And it's this technical combination of things that you're doing. Like charging up a wall and then bouncing off of it with such a tremendous force. Like if you added sci-fi to that and you made it look like something that didn't look like a bug, then the boost plant would have a place. You could turn it from a bug into a feature. That I want to say you're wrong, but you're so right. You're so right, and it hurts. We have all of these amazing sports, and very, very few people are willing to actually put in the time it takes to exercise to play a sport. I really want to be a boxer, and the amount of exercise that takes, should I do that, is tremendous. But if I do, I have to be willing to do it. None. Uh, Guy Curry. And that's, I mean, he might even be younger than that, actually. Mitchy Brusco? But even then, those are two people out of the thousands of skaters we've got. Like, being a legend in a sport like skateboarding now, especially that so many legends exist, it gets harder every day. And when it's harder to be the best in the world at something, less and less people want to do it. But it is still thousands of years later, and we're still hucking javelin and shot put, so who knows? I agree with the EA Skate 1 through 3 with just the Skate 3 controls and better rotations and stuff would be ideal. I've seen the alpha test footage of Skate over the last couple of years, and it just does not look good. There's it looks like it looks as a prototype like they are making a game for the Xbox 360 and then filling it with 100 players. I gotta wonder if anybody is working on some kind of skateboarding game outside of the norm. Skate Story looks interesting. Something like that. More of that. But from a large budget studio with the manpower to spare. You're absolutely right. The Xbox 360 was a great console. The Skate 4 devs want multiplayer. The multiplayer and like Matthias there says, the parkour are the big things that are gonna sell Skate 4. They want you to play American Wasteland with the skate engine, is what it's starting to feel like. Like, they are trying to hit the market that is the biggest fan base for American Wasteland and the things that it did, but also who now are Session and Skater XL players. Hellskate, I have not. That sounds interesting. Or maybe I have. I actually think I had some thoughts on this. In the same way that I have thoughts on Rollerdrome, in the same way that I have thoughts on Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Uh, I don't want combat in my action sports games. Swinging a sword, firing stuff, it worked in Rollerdrome better than any other game recently. But this, like, hack and slash skateboarding game mix, this doesn't look as promising as it could. They should have just made Sunset Overdrive, probably. Like this, but Sunset Overdrive, where it was all done on boots. I don't know, though. That is yet to be seen, because this game could turn out to be amazing. Favorite game soundtrack? Are we talking like original soundtrack or licensed? Because they're two different. The licensed soundtracks, Tony Hawk's Underground, 100%. The actual original soundtrack for a game, Hotel Dusk, Room 215 for the Nintendo DS, has just the best soundtrack of any game from my childhood. How do you why do companies try to remove campaigns from games still? Every single time a game series has had the campaign removed, there's been tremendous backlash for good reason. The removal of features is not something anybody enjoys. I know I particularly don't like the removal of features. Like, if a series is long running, don't be taking shit out of it. Oh, that's such an interesting. I love Persona is man, I have thoughts on Persona. I don't even want to say anything about that. I'll talk about Persona and the Shin Megami series later on because I have a lot of. That's an interesting one. That really is. Of all of the things that Skater XL doesn't do for me, the campaign is the thing that is preventative. I would play more Skater XL if there were a campaign or goals or even like dailies. You know what I mean? Land this trick or do this thing, just a daily. And that would keep me coming back to Skater XL. I do. I do like horror games. Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, followed closely by Resident Evil 7. I used to do a whole series where I'd go through doing indie horror games. That's a Let's Play series. I think that's still up on my channel somewhere. I feel like, but that's like, you can still engage with a game's campaign and also move on to its like the multiplayer definitely keeps people there. Games that have campaigns should also probably have multiplayer if they're made for it. Uh, but I don't think the removal of the campaign ever is necessarily the good idea. Yeah, I've played Dead Space 1 and 2. I didn't play 3. I heard bad things about 3, so I skipped it when I was young, but that's one I wanted to go back to. I've played every Silent Hill. When I was when I was 18, I played Silent Hill 3 for the first time, and it wasn't great. And before that, I had only ever played Silent Hill 1 and Shattered Memories. And now, since my original Silent Hill 3 review, way, way, way back when, I've played all of them. And I did my Silent Hill 3 Redux review, and it was like the same thing that Silent Hill IMO is not a good series. I think Silent Hill 2 and 4 are great games, excellent games. Silent Hill is not a good series. And it's funny that I say that because I probably like Konami more than the average person does. I I haven't played Ollie Ollie World yet. I've played the original though. I want to get a buddy. I gotta talk Zephyr into doing Dead Space 3 co-op with me because that looks like the more fun way to play it. It's hard. I forgot Silent Hill Downpour. Silent Hill 2, 4, and Downpour are all good games. Downpour less so, but still a really good game for what it is. I If you're a fan of Silent Hill, then don't go watch my Silent Hill 3 review because I say things that like any fan of Silent Hill will consider absolute blasphemy. It I'm not a fan. I'm not a big fan of those. On average, horror games get their visuals, their plot points, and their ideas right. And then most of the time, the execution is what they get wrong. It's very rare when you find a good horror game that nails the tension like they should. Like, sudden shock horror is only really effective when you have something that's built up to it for a really long time. And without the build up, without the tension, you don't really like that shock horror is much more meaningless. The thing that made Five Nights at Freddy's so successful was knowing that these things were walking around stalking you at random, and then eventually the shock horror would come. The terrifying part wasn't the scare. It was knowing that the scare was coming eventually. And that same thing kind of works with like I mentioned Resident Evil 7 a minute ago. That is another game where the tension was done right. Take the Marguerite fight, for instance. You're walking through into the barn, you're walking up, and it's pretty much empty for the most part. You can feel there's a boss fight coming. And then out of nowhere, Marguerite busts through the window and the whole thing starts. And it really is shock horror done right with the tension needed to build up. I don't like Oh, this is a take that upsets many people. I don't like The Last of Us. The Last of Us was a ripoff of 2012's Telltale Walking Dead and some ideas from the Walking Dead TV show, mixed together with ideas from other games that were actively in development, and it was put together very fast. And then somehow it became incredibly popular, and they remade the game a couple years later. I don't even understand like I don't know how that happened. I mean, when you look at it realistically, The Last of Us was 2012's The Walking Dead from Telltale with a crafting system, third person shooter elements, and evil fungus. But they were trying to spark the same, oh, this lowly survivor who's not a good guy but is trying to be a good guy does this thing for the group, and he's the fucking hard ass who's like, and it's always the same thing where they eventually build up to the people are more dangerous than the creatures, which if the people were more dangerous than the creatures, how did the creatures take over the world to begin with? I would consider the Silent Hills done wrong in the sense that Konami dipped their hand into them too much. If Team Silent were allowed to do what they originally intended to do with the anthology series, then it would have been better. Silent Hill 3 is the result of Konami digging their hand in, ruining the anthology idea, and shoehorning a sequel that nobody wanted just to kill off a main character in a way that nobody asked for. Silent Hill made all of these weird decisions as a game that aren't even the fault of Team Silent. They're the fault of Konami interfering. And that's what they get wrong. They get Konami. Konami gets Silent Hill wrong. They think it's all about Pyramid Head. But in reality, Silent Hill is a good, deep psychological uh, undertaking. And they really could have done amazing things with it. Most underappreciated video game genre, past or present. I'm with West Park on this one. Tank control games. The original Resident Evil remake. I don't care who you are. Tank controls work. And if you can't use them, it's a skill issue, right? It's being not good at something does not make that thing bad. It makes you not good at that thing. And tank controls worked incredibly well and still do. I can go back and play the Resident Evil 1 remake and still have an amazing time. And I think tank control games are probably the most underrated genre. Because they are their own thing. Not all tank control games are horror games. Some adventure games, like the Escape from Monkey Island, were tank control. And that really added a lot to it. It made it feel comfortable to play. I don't know. I feel like The Last of Us, it could have, maybe it nailed the story elements to other people, but it really just kind of touched on genericism to me. Like they were doing a bunch of things in that story that a bunch of other games up until that point had already done close to or around the same time. At the same time, just before we got The Last of Us, we got Telltale's The Walking Dead, I Am Alive, The Walking Dead Survival Instinct, Darksiders, and a number of other apocalypse driven games that all kind of contributed to this. By the time we got The Last of Us, the idea of the apocalypse was boring. And it wasn't until Fallout New Vegas that it became exciting again. But even then, like, it was only exciting for that one game. I Mortal Kombat 1, I couldn't tell you if it's successful or not. One thing I can tell you is that I didn't buy it because they're locking old school, old long running series characters behind paywalls. Like having to buy Quan Chi was a good reason to not buy Mortal Kombat 1. It's one thing to lock new fighters or extremely rare fighters that made one or two appearances behind a paywall. Like when Mortal Kombat 9 did Scarlet and Rain. Those were ideas, and they didn't get nearly as much attention as they could have in earlier games. So it made sense to paywall them. Whereas like Quan Chi was there all the time. I don't even know if I'd like a new IP from Naughty Dog. I'm looking up in the chat at that. I think I would rather have uh, the original Jack trilogy remade with modern hardware, modern rendering hardware. Don't even touch the gameplay. Just like if they were to take those three games, not touch the gameplay at all for any of them, and just upgrade the rendering tech, that would be the next great Naughty Dog release. And that's a shame. Fighting games rely on their balance. I don't keep up enough with Mortal Kombat to know how that's doing, but I don't think I could. In the beginning of Street Fighter 6, it really bothered that Ken was overpowered, and that wasn't just like that was just an everybody thing. But like tiny bit of nerf, little bit of balancing goes a long way. And it doesn't take that long. You just listen to the players. The players will tell you what does and does not make sense. Mostly. They fun fact about that. We actually did get a Jack 4 in the form of a game that wasn't that good, that a ton of people slept on. Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier is Jack 4 in the sense that it was a platformer like the originals and it came out after Jak X Combat Racing did, I'm pretty sure. It was sort of a return to the series. Yeah, I know we hate to remember it, but that is the fourth regular Jak and Daxter game. Uh, it's interesting. Rockstar Games could benefit from finishing Agent. That would be a great start from scratch IP. That would be awesome to have. The board is old. The board was secondhand. I bought an older one. When I got it, the battery bay had exploded batteries in it, so I had to clean the contact pins. Uh, it had a good amount of use, it looked like, already put into it before I got to it. Yeah, Rockstar's kind of focused entirely on their open world gigantism games, but like, whatever happened to Midnight Club? Midnight Club LA was a great game. Midway did a great. They were awesome for the original Mortal Kombat games. Like, you saw Midway's logo, and you knew you were in for something awesome. Yeah, we can't just go from That's why I was like, Agent would be a great game to have. LA Noir again, a second LA Noir maybe. Another Manhunt, because Manhunt is a game that they made twice and then never touched again, but there's room for lore there. There's room for world building. They can fit that into the GTA 5 universe now. I keep getting recommended videos of the Warriors, and I'm kind of leery of clicking on that because like I remember the movie being cheesy to hell. I don't know. I'll have to. The Warriors. I have to look at it. I want to play a bunch of games. The Warriors is a game that. Ah, look at that comments. You guys are active. You guys say all kinds of shit. Bully 2. Oh, what a sad. Wasn't Bully 2 in the work for a long time and then canceled and then brought back and then canceled again? Possibly. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what when I got that board. What when that board is from. I know that it's a I know it's a shred board and I know it's not the original shred board. So might be from later on. But I do know that that specific board I was using for Ride and Shred was really good. That's not sure how you get it past copyright. I don't. You guys want to see something hilarious? I don't get videos past copyright. That's not how this works. My videos get copyright claimed incredibly, but this is what you see when your videos get copyright claimed and you've actually used them fairly. Like it you can use copyrighted music within certain boundaries, doing certain things under certain pretexts. You can use copyrighted music, and as long as the copyright holders are making money off of it, then that's fine. Like they're not going to complain about making money off of it. I'm not looking to make money off of it. So it doesn't bother me having the copyright claims all over the place. Yeah, it may well have been. I have no idea how the other boards for those games are compared, but like I might they're not too expensive. I might get a hold of a ride board to see if there is a to see if I can feel the difference between the two. Because now I'm really curious. They do. Skateboarding and rock go hand in hand, but I never think I'm entitled as a content creator, I never think I'm entitled to use somebody else's shit for free. The musicians who make that music absolutely have to make some money off of it. The publisher who publishes the music has to make some money. All the team involved, the managers, the production crews, things like that. The money that they make, the minuscule amount of money that they make on my ad revenue is not nearly enough to justify the um I mean like it the music contributes to the interaction, and I feel like I don't do enough for the amount of music that I use. And my hope is just that whoever owns it is making the money that they should be making off of it. Right, it's different when I'm reading something and constructed and when I'm just talking offhand. It's a little bit more, and I'm also a little bit further away from my like when I read my videos, I sit up incredibly close like this, or at least I try to, and then I get away from it and it starts to echo a little bit and like I have no idea if that was too loud because I don't know what the OBS volume sounds like. I totally forgot to ask when I started the stream. When I first started skating, I was skating a 7.25 with steel bearings. Um, Not a Walmart board, thicker than a Walmart board, strong enough to hold me, but not a good board. Now I ride an 8 and 25 with ceramic bearings. I have no idea. Um, if they if they do, then I don't know what to tell them. You know, life is short. Life is short. It's something that we have very little of, and we should take seriously and treat preciously. So, like, if somebody watching one of these videos hears that at any point suddenly and has a problem with that, the most I can assume is that they are not having a good day. Yeah, yeah, and that people misconstrue being inspirational as telling them what to do. And in other cases, when somebody is just too lazy to do something, they don't like being told what to do. And it's not me being mean in the way that I want to call anyone who's not doing something lazy. It's just that, like, if you have the passion enough to complain about me telling you to live your life, then you clearly have too much free time. Maybe living your life is the right thing to do. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't care. Is ultimately the thing for me is I don't care. Like they do. Life is short. I know that. I appreciate it, and I can't force anybody to appreciate it. The most I can do is hope that others take away the appreciation for life that I have and roll with that same kind of because we only have this one, right? We don't know what comes before, we don't know what comes after. We only have this one. So we appreciate it for what it is if we want it. If you really want life, then you take it and you appreciate it and it might be hard. It's never going to be easy. Life is not an easy thing. But nothing is an easy thing. That's the joy of it all. You challenge yourself and you move forward. You be a contender. I'm at an 8-inch. Feels tiny, which is insane because early 2000 everyone went 7.5 or what I think of 825. I wear a size 13 shoe, and I'm 6'2". So an 8 and 25-inch is like the perfect size for my height weight ratio in my foot. It just feels so comfortable. I have a video talking about, I don't like the PS2 version of Downhill Jam, but I haven't made the video on the Wii version yet, and spoiler alert, I do like that. I'll just let that, I just saturate that for a moment, because, like, they are dramatically different games. It's hard to talk about Downhill Jam because of how many versions of it there are. That is a good point. I wasn't even thinking about that. The Mongo and there's just the issue of, like, I know that pushing Mongo is something that I wouldn't encourage, but also it is something that some people genuinely feel is comfortable, and they do. And I found that out. One of the Tony Hawk videos, I found that out. There were people who talked about pushing Mongo and it feeling good to them. And who am I to say what feels good to someone who's not me? Yeah, no, the Wii version of Downhill Jam is not even close to the PS2 version. They're so different. They're so substantially different. The PS2 version is like 1/3 with a lot more bugs, and it's just not good. The PS2 version of Downhill Jam is Boom Boom Sabotage, the video game. Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to, but pushing Mongo doesn't feel as comfortable now as it did when I was a kid. Yeah, when I was a really, really little kid, I'd throw whatever foot down I felt like, but now I can feel gravity pull my back leg as the leg that should be pushing me forward. And that's just like my brain telling me, "Hey, brace yourself with your front and push with your back so that you don't fall down." You do. You control the Wii version with motion controls, or you can play it with the balance board, which is an interesting way to go about it. I think you can play it with the balance board. Maybe I'm thinking of Skate It. Just feel more comfortable, but so does doing fakey. Yeah. Could skateboarding ever become popular in modern day? I mean, it's never been not popular. Skateboarding has had ups and downs and highs and lows, and like there was a whole time there where the entire country was tearing down pretty much every skate park that existed. Skateboarding comes and goes in its waves and phases. And I think right now skateboarding is really popular comparatively. There are other sports that wish they could pull in the retention and viewership that skateboarding does. Yeah, or Skate It, you can play with the balance board. I remember that specifically because I had that game as a kid. I had to look at the cover and make sure I was thinking of the right game. I mapped Skate It to controller controls not that long ago in Dolphin to see how that worked. Yeah, inline skating probably had the biggest drop off. It had one of the fastest rises and biggest falls in all of action sports history. And now there are only a handful of inline skaters. And I want to be like it. People should be like trying to skate, but also maybe inline is not the best way to do it if you care about your ankles. Uh, Name and reputation. He thrived on ridiculousness. I know Rob Dyrdek was a skater to some, but that's like saying Rob Dyrdek is a skateboarder is like saying Jason Lee is a skateboarder. He was at some point, I guess. It after the fact though, like most he can do is just be encouraged. It's like when a boxer becomes a boxing coach. They did, and now they teach. Yeah, inline skaters are. There's something about inline skating that changes the way you approach objects and obstacles and things like that. And if you look at inline skaters, they're all very, very flashy and styly. It's it's almost got a beauty to it, like figure skating has. But then it also, along with that, comes with the caveat that landing means landing flat every single time and coming down on your heels every single time. And if you know anything about falling, you know you probably shouldn't land on your Achilles tendon constantly like that. Like that is a surefire way to destroy your legs. No, absolutely not. If Mike Tyson became a coach, that wouldn't destroy his legend as a fighter at all. But what it would do is encourage other people to try to live up to that legend, right? Be doing something great and then passing that knowledge on is just what we can hope for. Somebody who has done and accomplished something amazing should always be looked at as the potential to learn something amazing. Oh yeah, yeah. See, that's what having Rob Dyrdek there telling the kids, "Hey, it's good to go out and be a skater," and that really is helpful. Jason Lee, the tray flip. Jason Lee was actually a pretty good skateboarder. Like aside from the aside from the tray flip, he was a pretty good skateboarder. Yeah, no thanks. The boot doesn't speak to me. Like as much as I like snowboarding as a sport, I love watching snowboarding and I'm a big fan of alpine ski racing. But the idea of being booted into your device is not something that is appealing because like you if what if you need to kick the shit away, you know? From a skateboarding perspective, you want to kick your board away because it probably might smack you or do something. And with snowboarding, being strapped to the board means that like you might actually hurt yourself more. Man, what up? Just welcome from Argentina. Wow, that's quite the distance. I mean, but if if you have somebody to look up to and you aspire to be like them, you will never be them. You are always the first yourself. You should never consider your aspiration to be like somebody else as if you are not being yourself. You're just building what you idealize yourself to be like around somebody else's ideas. And that doesn't mean it's not you, it just means that you agree heavily with what you're building around. We live in a world where having physical games right now is more necessary than it's ever been. But I also think if you're just buying games and you don't plan on collecting them for a very long time, buying them digitally is the way to go so you don't have to worry about breaking anything. For the sake of preservation, buy a physical game. For the sake of just playing games that you know you're going to play a shit ton of, buy a digital game. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that though. Like, once we don't have Tony Hawk and Rob Dyrdek, isn't it going to be nice to have somebody who can at least match that energy? Somebody who was so inspired to be like them that they make you look at them and go, wow, I remember when that was new. And that is their legacy. They are the continuation of. Bruce Lee didn't invent Kung Fu, but he is so well recognized for adapting Kung Fu amazingly. My favorite color is red. And that's just because I is the color that I see the most of. I'm a little bit, my vision's a little bit wonky, so I see hues of red just about everywhere. Yeah, now is a time more than ever where video game preservation is at risk because of how many games are online only, server sided, and will shut down eventually. Those are the games that you don't buy physically because there's no reason to have them physically if they're gone one day. Those are the games that you buy digitally. The games that you buy physically are the games that you know you're going to be able to come back to. Um, Take, for example, hold on, I'm going to stand up and grab something. Take, for example, Pro Skater 5. I absolutely did not need this. I 100% did not need a physical copy of this game. But I got one. And I got one because it's not an online all the time game that I'll never come back to. It's a game that one day I may not be able to digitally get, and I wanted to be able to come back to it if I wanted to. Yeah, exactly. In 10 years, all we'll have is footage of these games. The games originally, as they were, won't even exist anymore. And, I mean, that's already true of some games. Like, EverQuest 1 is very, very old. And it's still operational now. But the original EverQuest is long gone. The EverQuest 1 that we have now is the late term HD EverQuest that it adapted into over time. And the original game only exists in footage. Like, I don't even think we have footage of the original EverQuest now that I think about it. Apparently there's a mod that is working on putting that back. Like this version of EverQuest does not exist anymore. Yeah. Emulation is a great way of preserving games that can't be played anymore because of licensing. Licensing is another major killer for video games. Games with licensed soundtracks or licensed likenesses, anything like that, where the contract is set to expire at some point in the future, those eventually are doomed to become abandonware. So the only way to play them is emulating or, some kind of piracy. And at that point, like, if nobody is publishing it, if it's been my general rule of thumb is that if it's been 10 years since a game has been actively developed or released and nobody's doing anything with it, I'll consider it abandonware. And at that point, the act of downloading it just doesn't matter. Like, until it gets sold again, it's abandonware. But if it's on a storefront, then it's not. Yeah. Yeah, if you bought Destiny, the only way to get Destiny 2 on disc and not have it changed would be somehow to set up a private server in which you connected to the original Destiny 2. And that is like it the game itself is not as there as it needs to be to play the game. Destiny 2 came with a bunch of day one patches. Man, look at those graphics. Wow. Hello there. We've been at this for almost 3 hours. I think when I hit the 3 hour mark, I'll call it. Um, I answered a little bit about games and sports games and skateboarding and talked about my channel origin a tiny amount. So yes, by the way, since we're getting there, like more questions is always good. So we say Nintendo have IPs they don't. Yeah. Nintendo is not a good company uh, at all, though. Like they don't. They would sell you the original Super Mario Brothers for $60 today if they could. Um, my profile picture probably. I used to spend a lot of time on Newgrounds. Anytime I draw stuff, people tell me that my stuff reminds them of Newgrounds, so I would probably have to say that. Like, my profile picture is inspired by the old days of Flash Newgrounds. I still have Macromedia Flash 8 on my desktop. That's actually what the now playing graphic was animated in Macromedia Flash 8. Yeah. Yeah, if Nintendo had it their way, they would revoke the licenses to everything so they could sell it to you again. That Nintendo historically not friendly. I did a little bit in my Fantasy Star review where I talked about Nintendo's really shitty licensing practices in the 80s. And they're just not they're not a selfless company to any degree. No, I don't think a particular game uh, when I think of my profile picture, I don't think any particular game. I just think of like I'm sort of a disappearing act. It's a ghost because I was sort of a disappearing act in that I would upload videos and then I wouldn't upload videos for months and months at a time, and it just had been that way for many years. Um, Games copy games. Pal World, if they copied Pokemon, Pokemon copied some other shit. I don't hear anybody complaining that Telefang was copying Pokemon way back when, you know? Or you never hear Magic the Gathering players call Yu-Gi-Oh a Magic the Gathering ripoff. It it just is what it is. I think things are inspired by things and searching for originality is harder and harder every day. My biggest problem with Pal World is that it's a bandwagon game. And I mean that in the nicest possible way that I can. Yeah, we have the 1080 snowboarding and 1080 avalanche are coming up sooner than I would like. Amped is taking a while because that game is pretty big. That's up there with Steep and with Skate. I'm doing EA Skate as a trilogy first. I'm working on Steep a little in the back behind that. And Amped should be right after that. Plus, while I've got those going on, there are the other little, like, I have a couple of little things I want to talk about too. I also think there's a great misconception between. You say that Neversoft didn't throw shade at THPS clones, and I personally have not seen many games that are actually clones of Pro Skater. And you know what's funny is that games that get called THPS clones usually get shit on for having bad gameplay because the people who are playing them treat them like Pro Skater when they are not. Andy McDonald's skateboarding for the PS1 is not Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And if you play it like Pro Skater, you're not playing it right. It's not the same game. But it still gets called a Pro Skater clone for some reason. Uh, Shredders I've seen looks really cool. BMX Streets, definitely going to give a shot too. That looks amazing. I have. I've played the Skating and Riders Republic. Um, I don't know why they didn't just use the Shaun White skateboarding engine, but I, I mean, I can't fault them for doing something new. The skateboarding in Riders Republic is almost good in that flips and rolls are way too sensitive in the corners. You can do a 360 backflip completely by accident, um, and that's not good. Kingdom Hearts isn't a Final Fantasy clone. Kingdom Hearts is a Final Fantasy spin-off. It's it's an action hack and slash game based on Final Fantasy with some Disney characters. I mean, they even are partially in the same sort of multiverse thing. Yeah, Tony Hawk games do have clones. The Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure is in fact a Tony Hawk game clone. But there is a big line to be drawn between what is and is not a clone of a game. At least from my perspective. Scoot and Scooter Flow look good. Crayola Scoot is one that I really am leery about talking about because like I feel like I'm gonna be mean to it unintentionally. I don't want to, but I feel like I might accidentally be mean to that game unintentionally. I mean, whether you agree with Kingdom Hearts being a spin-off or not is irrelevant to the fact that it was made by Square, uses Final Fantasy characters, and is tied into the Final Fantasy multiverse over and over again. You couple that in with the fact that the gameplay doesn't even resemble Final Fantasy and more so resembles Crisis Core or something like that. And I mean, it's pretty much just a Final Fantasy spin-off. That's to be a clone of something means to be a copy. Uh, what's a good example of a clone? Let me think on this for a sec, because like there are great examples of clones. Uh, Competition does not create innovation. Competition creates drive. Competition creates uh, passion and the willingness to overcome adversity. But competition inherently does not breed innovation. Because when you're competing, you're trying to do things that people know already work against things that you think don't work. And very, very rarely do you get competitors who push boundaries. Like, playing it safe is a competition caveat that prevents and stagnates innovating. Yeah, we'll do Stoked looks pretty interesting. I have a whole the list gets bigger and bigger every day. We've got I because I'm always getting aside from the list as it is, I always get your guys' suggestions and that adds more to it. And I'm finding a bunch of games just going through because there are I am an American and my exposure to games for most of my life was limited to America. So branching outside of America into games that were exclusive to Japan and Europe and Germany and Italy and other countries has kind of been opening up this like there's a can of worms of games that almost never get talked about that I also really want to talk about. Oh yeah, Thug Pro absolutely deserves its own video. Yeah, competition. So it's funny that you say competition creates secrecy. I was just watching Unchained earlier, the untold story of FMX, and Brian Deegan. When the 360 backflip was created, Brian Deegan saw Travis Pastrana doing the 360 backflip and practicing to make that happen, and he went off on his own and decided he also wanted to make that happen. And Brian Deegan wound up landing that trick first. And the respect is there for him. You know, even from Travis Pastrana himself, the respect is there for him landing that trick. But it is also a competition. And showing your competitors the tricks that you're working on is a surefire way to make sure that they also are doing those things. Like, if what you are doing is obviously the biggest thing that's being done, you're going to try to keep that a secret, maybe. And if you don't, somebody else is going to do it first. Yeah, yeah. Pastrana one upped him with the double backflip, absolutely. But in the same night that Deegan landed that 360 backflip, Pastrana fell and then called a timeout and then did it again. So there's also that. There's no disrespect to be had for any of the riders, right? Because that is the most dangerous action sport, really. It is just such an incredible accomplishment that it happened in the first place. But that is an example of a situation in which keeping something secret would have benefited the competition, but did not overall benefit the sport. Like, it's good that multiple people did it, because Travis could have very well tried to keep it a secret. That's it's funny that you say that because video game features getting patented is a very rare occurrence. It takes special conditions for that to happen. And with Disney, especially, it doesn't look like the special conditions were met nearly as much. So that's a bad like that game definitely absolutely probably should have been open sourced a little bit. But also the idea of I like open source software. I'm pretty open to the idea of the general public licensing rights and open source software as a whole and Git and everything that keeps software running and functioning in the modern age. But there's no denying that software engineers cannot work for free. The idea that all software should be free is to say that all software engineers should work for free. And that just can't happen. In order for free software to exist, we have to have proprietary software making money to fund that. But see, that's like, and that's interesting because I don't know. Yeah, okay, so there's the argument to be made wingsuit, wingsuits especially are very dangerous. I think in the case of X Games action sports specifically, freestyle motocross is the most dangerous sport. And I say that because if you land on an FMX bike flat in just the wrong way, you can break your neck and potentially sever your spinal cord. Like, FMX has the risk of death greater than that of skateboarding, BMX, surfing combined. Maybe not surfing, maybe not the Laird Hamilton kind of big wave surfing or deep sea surfing. Maybe not Arctic surf. There are many different forms of surfing that are incredibly dangerous, but your average surfing's not nearly as dangerous as landing on flat on an FMX bike. Just just the smallest wrong landing can kill you. That's how dangerous motocross is. Blur was cool. Snowmobiles, same amount of danger. Snowcross is another equally dangerous sport for a lot of the exact same reasons. And it has the extra dangerousness of the tread on the back of the snowmobile and the weight of the tread and the weight of the machine itself. So there are all of those things. Any motocross based sport, and I know it sounds weird to lump skidoo racing in with that, but it is kind of a motorcycle in that same sense as a dirt bike would be. So they're all motocross in that way. Like it has a motor and it crosses. Wave Race 64 was really good. There are amazing speed runs of that game. Tragic Ken Block. That Ken Block was an amazing driver. Something that needs a game that has never gotten a game that should is Kendo. I think you could make a really good Kendo video game. Somebody out there with the right attention to detail could make a beautiful and engaging Kendo simulator or even just a fast-paced Kendo action game, and that would be awesome. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Tromps around some arcades. That I haven't been to an arcade in a long ass time, so that probably would be worth doing. Yeah, I have no idea, but if any console would, it would be the Wii. I know we had um Wii Sports Resort had a sword fighting or something. I might be wrong about that. Yeah, yeah, swordplay. Yeah, I know, but Kendo is like one of those things that like there are a lot of different martial arts that don't get games that would make for outstanding video games. And outside of martial arts, there are a lot of other just great sports and things people do that would make for great video games that don't really get them. Like, we don't have nearly as many superbike racing games as we should. There are a few, and the ones that exist are mostly simulators in the modern age. But superbikes are amazingly fast. And arcade style action racing games on superbikes is sort of something that got lost in the swell of stuff that was getting made. There was a time when bike racing games were very common, and now we just don't have that. We've hit we've hit the 3 hour mark. If anybody's got any like last minute questions or anything, or like Yeah, EA also did the Road Rash games, which was a big like those are great motorcycle games. Freak Style, like Max said, is a great lesser known bike racing game. Very little known. I was actually kind of like I was surprised to see uh motocross games so kind of underappreciated. Like when I was younger growing up, I was almost positive motocross was more popular than skateboarding. And it wasn't until I was older that I found out that it was the other way around. My favorite Resident Evil ripoff is Eternal Darkness, probably. But that's only a Resident Evil ripoff in part. There are other parts of that. There's an actual licensed super bike game. Ah, that's interesting. I'll have to. There are a whole lot of bike games that I've got the tourist trophy games on my list of things to do, and the Kawasaki game for the PS2 and stuff like that, and the Ride series, and add more to the superbike list. Longboards from Penny Crook. Ah,
So there.
Riders Republic getting longboarding. See that kind of downhill insanity. That's hill bombing. I just it couldn't do. That shit is terrifying. You know what though? I respect that. Like I that looks like a really chill experience. Oh, it was just straight up called Superbike. That is awesome. Would I ever do a game? Yeah, of course. The act of developing a game is long and tedious and long. If it came, if I wanted to do a skateboarding game, I would need to have a team behind me. Like I've worked on game projects over and over again. There are tons of little things that I start and I don't finish, and I spent a lot of time learning to program. But if I were to make a game actually, I would want a team behind me that took it as seriously as I did because genuinely I want if I do make a game that is to any degree passionate, I want it to be passionate. I want it to be something that somebody plays and comes back to and they're like, I can't believe that that exists. Yeah. Um, no, I haven't looked at the Rooftops and Alleys gameplay yet, but that is I will look into that now since I'm off on this looking at stuff. Another one of these. Oh, these guys. Everybody's making a game and they're designing a thing. And you know what? Honestly, that looks really cool. Mirror's Edge is kind of what that reminded me of a little bit, but with a third person camera. Would you rather have to do that hill on a longboard or a luge board? Longboard, 100%. 100%. Luge boards are dangerous. Um, I think it depends on the mood of the game. In terms of an action sports game, if I was doing a skateboarding game, I'm not even necessarily sure a story is the right way to go, but you probably want to do something upbeat. Every story needs a conflict. So you probably do a story about a skater who's up and coming and then you do some conflict with a rival and you end out in such a way that leaves the main character on top. And that, so you do something upbeat, but with a little bit of like struggle to overcome. Rodney Mullen wrote a couple of days. Yeah, Rodney Mullen absolutely deserves. Rodney Mullen should have had his own video game a very, very long time ago. Flatland, not Flatland, whatever. He should have been the face of something. Games is so, yeah, man. I appreciate that. I just try to be honest. Like everyone says some shit that they hear somebody else say about a game. I just play a game and try to be honest about it. Have you played Session? I have played Session. I'm not a fan. um, Session has so many good ideas, and it's still an early access game. Post release, even after the game has already been taken out of early access, it is still an early access game. The experimental features from early access are still in the options menu. It's still broken. Primos still bend and contort your ankles. Session is unfinished and has been unfinished for a very long time. Yeah, maybe. Uh, I'm interested because there aren't that many parkour games. At least not. There aren't that many good parkour games. We are uh, we are at the ridiculous 3 hours and 15 minutes mark. We'll go ahead and fit in the last couple of questions here if anybody's got any, and we'll kind of close this out. It's my throat's starting to go a little ragged on me. I realized I haven't had any water in a few hours. The actual channel. So that is actually like, I think the most interesting thing about this is that this probably should have been made years ago by a team of people. This this idea looks so simple, but at the same time like something you can have a lot of fun with. Like it's amazing that this exactly hasn't already been done. Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. That's you guys. That 2K, that's you guys. That makes all of that possible. You guys make it fun. You guys keep it fun. I mean, you know what? I'll look at the camera. I've been looking away from it a little bit. I'll look at the camera. I'll do my best to eye contact, prolonged eye contact. I appreciate you. Yeah, a Mario game with some of those parkour mechanics would be awesome. Like the twisting and flipping in air is a really neat idea. If you could just if you could just like do the Mario 64 jump dive, but then you could 360 that dive, that would be sweet. You want a sneak peek of the next video? Uh, why in the world would I do that? You know, I already gave you a sneak peek of the next video. If you watch the Tony Hawk Ride and Shred video, it's one of the two games that I played in that was not Ride and Shred. So, to everyone's knowledge, the next game could either be a Fight Night title or a Wrestle Kingdom title. It's one of those two. But I really want to do something Like I thought about mixing more stuff back in. I used to do a bunch of different games, and I want to add fighting back in, but I'll use like boxing as a way to introduce fighting games back into the mix. Yeah, there's Fight Night is a good boxing game that I want to talk about at length. And then at the end of the video, I did the Japanese pro wrestling game Wrestle Kingdom. That was Wrestle Kingdom 2 I was playing, and those are games also that I want to talk about because they're interesting for their own variety of reasons. But I'm always, if you're keen, you keep a clean eye and you pay attention to the videos. I'm always dropping hints at what's coming next. I'm always doing something. The Def Jam games are also something that I need to get to too, very, very soon. Oh yeah, parkour. Parkour is something people have done a lot of in little amounts. The little dogs. Yeah, parkour is something that we've had a lot of done in little amounts. And I think that we only have a couple of really solid parkour only games. And we were at the I dragged that out for a little longer than I wanted to, but thanks to everybody who showed up for this and stuck around for a little while. It was cool to talk and hang and talk about myself, the channel, games, dive a little bit into, you know, thinking about stuff that I wouldn't normally like, because the questions about sports, the sports themselves in particular, are the most interesting ones here, because I don't often talk as much about the actual sport as I would like to. I spend so long talking about the video games that actually talking about the sports goes lost. But yeah, thank you guys for popping around, and we'll do that. We'll do that 3K doggo reveal. I got you. I got you. We'll bring out the doggos for that. But yeah, thanks everybody, and I suppose that's it. I'll